Today we're going to be looking at the story of the Transfiguration of Jesus. It's found in Matthew chapter 17, and we'll look at verses 1 through 8. Now, the Transfiguration of Jesus, some of you might be familiar with it, some might not. It's a moment when Jesus undergoes a physical transformation in his appearance. And the idea is that Jesus, for a moment, reveals who he really is. Not that he isn't who he really is when he was with his disciples, but he reveals a bigger picture of who he is. Me, there's not a bigger picture. This is what it is. But with Jesus, there really was a bigger picture, being the Son of God. So this is the moment that we're going to look at here in Jesus and what the implications were. Just before this, Jesus was asking his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And his question was, why are people following me or not following me? What are they saying? And that's an important question for us. This morning we saw several different versions of the question why. And that's a question each of us have to ask. And then it's also important for us, even if we've asked it before, for us to come back to it and remind ourselves why we follow Jesus. Why is it that I actually follow him? What is it about him? Why is it that I'm dedicating my life to walking in his steps and becoming like him as the Spirit enables me to? Why would I do that? The disciples gave several answers, and when asked, well, what about you? Who do you say that I am? And of course, Peter's answer was, well, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah. You're the expected one that's come to save the world. That was a lot. That was a mouthful. That was the elephant in the room that you kind of weren't allowed to say. And then Peter just, of course it's going to be Peter, blurts this out. This is who you are. This is why we are going through this with you. This is why we are here. And so the first thing I want to bring up here is just that. Jesus asked, who do you say that I am? And that's our question. In following that, Jesus appeared to them before this moment normally, as anybody would. He grew up in a town that was near them. They're all familiar with Nazareth. He had a normal job. He was a carpenter or a stonemason, perhaps. He was a guy who would have had very rough hands. He probably would have looked pretty rugged. He didn't seem to have lived a privileged life in the least. And looking at him, you would just say, I can't tell the difference between Jesus and anybody else walking around. And that is true. Jesus appeared, and very much in a way that we would recognize, that we could relate to, say, yeah, I'm sure I understand a lot of his life because of who he is. But right after this, Jesus takes his disciples, at least three of them, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Peter, James, and John, up a mountain. And he takes them up this mountain, and from this mountain, they get a perspective that they didn't have before. They get a perspective of what is coming. They get an idea of what is really happening on a much deeper level. Something that sometimes we are so busy in our day-to-day lives that we forget the journey we really are on. We forget the why behind everything that we do. And it's important for us to come to a point in our lives, even if it is once a week or less often than that, where we come and we remind ourselves, this is why I am following Jesus. This is why I am a Christian. And you get to see a picture, and you remind yourself, and you see what's going to be happening, the direction we are going in. And this big picture is the motivation that we have to continue in our faithfulness with God. And in this big picture, we see here, the second point I'd like to make is this, who this Jesus really is. Now, jumping from this Transfiguration into the book of Revelation, Jesus there is described as having eyes like flames of fire, and his face was brilliant like the sun. And so it's a completely different picture than the guy at the bottom of the mountain, the rugged guy, the guy with the calloused hands, the guy who had been through a lot. Probably at that point, probably looked a little old for his age. This is a guy who was carrying a lot of weight on his shoulders. And in the midst of that, while all that is true, and that's what they saw, there was something else very true about Jesus, is that he also existed in a different realm where he was the Son of God, where he was God, the third person of the Trinity, where he had a different experience on this earth, and an experience that transcends the timeline. We all want to know, how old is the earth? Well, there is a date for the earth, isn't there? Of course, there's a date. We might argue about it, but regardless, somebody knows what the date of the earth is, or somehow there's a number. He transcends all that. He transcends all of that. And what we see is this Jesus who is just all powerful and has such a physical appearance that derails us in our assumptions, and it becomes wholly other than we might ever expect, and we just become somebody that we see something that words cannot describe. We see someone that it just is. It just is. And deep in our hearts, we have that experience with this someone. It's hard to describe. We can never say things to convince anybody, but we know what we know what we know. We know what we have experienced, and we know what we have seen. And that's what we see with this Jesus. That's what we see. Now, not only is Jesus changing his appearance on this mountain for these few moments with the disciples, but he is up there with two other people who have appeared with him. Mysteriously, these are not people that were a part of Jesus' life or part of the day-to-day. These are very old people who have lived in faraway ages. Moses appeared in this moment with Jesus on this mountain with his three disciples, three apostles, and along with that, there is Moses. Moses died 1,300 years before this. That's a long time. In fact, the Bible, nobody knows where Moses was buried. It just says that Moses went out and God buried him. And here is Moses, just as alive as can be, having a conversation with Jesus on top of this mountain. And not only is Moses living in this moment on this mountain with this transfiguration, with this change in Jesus' appearance, but there is also Elijah. Now, Moses is known for writing the laws, and that's very important in our faith, foundational in our faith. Elijah represents all of the prophets, and Elijah had some insight into Jesus. He wrote so much predicting the coming of Jesus. And here he is on this mountain in this moment and showing himself with Jesus. And we get this picture of what the world is going to look like if we endure, if we remain faithful. There is something completely radically beyond our imaginations different. So we get this glimpse of eternity in this moment where we will soon be in eternity. And regardless of how long ago somebody lived, they will be alive today in that moment, and you will have a conversation with them. We think that our technology has done great advancements in communication. Oh, nothing like this. Nothing like this is where people who have been in God's presence and died long, long ago, in a moment in eternity, appear together. And this gives us, it's like a trailer for a movie. And it's something that you and I can look at and see the story, and we get an idea of what is coming. This is what the story is going to look like. Now, do we get the whole story? No, we don't. You never get the whole story in the trailer, right? But you do get a taste of it. You get little pieces, things that you will see when you watch the movie. There will be pretty quick moments of the things that you see. But you will see those things and a whole lot more. We are looking at a movie trailer of eternity. We are looking at a movie trailer of the future. We're not going to see everything, but we're going to see little pieces that we will be able to identify when we are there in eternity. And that's the place that Jesus is talking. That's the place where Jesus is moving us too, to understand that there is something in following Jesus that is so much more than a lifestyle, that is so much more than good advice, or so much more than a philosophy or a religion. Transcends all of that, and it just moves us into a whole nother world. So let's read here this passage together. Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 8. And I'll read the first verse, and you guys read the second, and we'll do that all the way through verse 8. And so let's go. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves.
There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light.
Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus.
Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah.
While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. But Jesus came and touched them. Get up, he said. Don't be afraid.
When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus.
And the third point that I would like to make is the Transfiguration reveals a major reason for our faithfulness. This is a moment in this Jesus who all of us can come into a relationship. This is the moment, this is this Jesus that we can understand. This is the Jesus, same Jesus with all of the brilliance, with all of the fire. This is the same Jesus who the Spirit makes real to us in our relationship. When we talk about a personal relationship with Jesus, this is the Jesus that we are referring to. The big Jesus, the eternal Jesus, the sovereign Jesus. When we sing our worship songs about Jesus, this is the Jesus that we are referring to. This is the Jesus that we are talking about. This is the Jesus that we would do well to have in our heads, of how powerful, how overwhelming, and how in control, and how sovereign he is in every area. This is the Jesus. And this helps us understand the motivation we have to have a relationship with Jesus and to be faithful with Jesus all the way through our lives. Never before was anybody ever able to be in the presence of God and be at peace. Always before, there was a lot of fear. In fact, Jesus God had told, and probably the incarnate Jesus, had told Moses. Moses wanted to be with God, wanted to see God. God said, no, if you see me, you will die. Do not look at me. And, so that was the whole thing. Elijah, the same thing. He went up on a mountain, and he asked if he could see God. And God says, no, you cannot see me. If you see me, you will die. So what you should do is you should get into this little cleft of this rock, and you hide in there, and I will walk by. And then we saw all the different things that went, and that wasn't God, and the still small voice, there's God. He couldn't see God. Here we have these two guys meeting with Jesus on this mountain, and they are having a conversation. And so we begin to see that it's different now. When Jesus came to the earth, when he was born and lived his life, something broke in that hierarchy. Something broke in that barrier that now not only are these great men, prophets, leaders, not only are they able to see Jesus, but we also are able to be in the presence of Jesus without any fear. Now, just a bit before this, Habakkuk, one of the prophets, he wrote about this. And he talked about how when he was in the presence of God, again, not seeing God face to face, but when he was just in the presence of God, he said his lips quivered, his heart pounded, and his legs trembled, just being in the presence of God. And then you go a little further, you go to the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi. And Malachi talked about how the presence of God was a great fire, and he defined it as a refiner's fire, just as hot as you could ever get, anything to melt the metals, anything to melt the elements. That's who God was in this moment. And here in this moment that they are on this mountain, Jesus appears still all who he is, but now able to have a relationship, now able to be at one with everyone else. This is a tremendous moment. You know, Peter was here watching this whole thing, right? And poor Peter, he gets criticized for everything. He's, hey, I'm going to build 3 tents, 3 places for us. And in Peter, he was just completely blown away by what he was witnessing. And we today, we kind of criticize Peter. Peter, you're kind of putting them all together. You're going to build 3 as if they're all. No, Peter. One is not like the others. One is not like the others, Peter. Jesus is supreme to them all. They are here to worship. They are here to be with Jesus. Jesus is the one, Peter. It's not the other guys. This moment made such a mark in Peter's life that at the very end of his life, Peter was executed, probably by Nero. At the very end of his life, Peter was in this moment remembering and writing a letter to the churches of the Roman Empire, not to anything specifically, but to everybody. This is probably the year 65, 67, so it'd be 30, 40 years after Jesus, 30, right? Years after Jesus. And he is writing to everybody. And in the second letter he wrote, 2 Peter, he writes about this. He writes about the transfiguration of Jesus. And he says, I saw this with my own eyes. I was there. I know what I saw. My eyes are not lying to me. This is what I saw, and what I saw is what you will see. And it really matters that you stay faithful to Jesus, because this day is coming. Jesus will return. And in Peter's day, imagine this, we're just talking 65 AD. Here we are at 2026, and we're sitting there going, geez, sure, it's taken a long time. I don't know, is he really going to come? Maybe it was a scam. Peter, even in those early years, what we would say are early years, he's saying, he's coming. He's coming. I know a lot of you are thinking he's not going to come anymore, that it's been too long. But no, remember that 1,000 years is as a day, and a day is at 1,000 years to the Lord. He's coming. Don't try to put a time frame, a timeline. That's not going to say one thing or the other, has completely irrelevant to who this Jesus is. Jesus is coming back. He is coming back, and we need to live our lives in such a way that we are expecting him, that we are ready for him. And Peter reminds us he is coming like a thief in the night. A thief, he's not telling anybody. Sometimes he even waits for you to least expect it, for you to be out to lunch. He's coming, and he reminds the people of that. And he tells them, you guys might think that God is slow, that Jesus is slow in his return. He's not slow. He's not slow. He's patient with you. He's patient with you. He doesn't want anybody to be lost. He's waiting for everybody to come to faith in him, to believe in him. That's why there is a delay. If there is a delay, Jesus is waiting for all of us, giving us that chance to come into his presence. That was Peter. Peter was beheaded maybe months after he wrote this. But the moment and the picture of the transfiguration seared in his mind and in his heart the reality of who Jesus is, the big picture of who Jesus is. And this is what he carried, and this is what he wanted people to know. And in that, we can kind of walk away with 2 lessons in this. The first lesson is this: you're going to have to carry a cross. It's going to be painful. It's not easy to follow Jesus. Jesus leads us into some very uncomfortable places. That's true, and that's okay, because we are going with Jesus. We're not alone. So don't expect there to be wonderful things and easy things. Don't expect the world just to be a mountaintop view. No, life is hard, and that's just the way it is. Especially as you follow Jesus, you have different values and different views and different priorities than the world, and you're going to suffer for it. You're going to pay a price. You're not going to be as popular as you thought you might be, or you might have these opportunities. But remember, you don't live for this world. This lifetime is too short for who you are truly created to be. You are an eternal being. And saying, I'm going to live for the next 10 minutes is a joke. Live for eternity. That's who you are. Every human being created in the image of God is an eternal being. That's why Christians have valued life forever from the very beginning, because we understand that a human being is a person created in the image of God, and there's nothing more important in all of creation than a being created in the image of God, and not a being that has a time lifespan, but a being that is truly created and made to live for all of eternity. And someday in eternity, everybody who was created in the image of God, we will be together again. There is a day coming like that, and we are to live in expectation and look forward to the day of the coming of the Lord. That's where our mindsets need to be, setting the priorities of how we value things, setting what's important, what should I dedicate my life to, what should I really set my mind and understanding to, what should be important to me. We set those priorities in line with who Jesus is and his return for us. And not only is it hard, not only do we carry our cross, that would be the first lesson. The second lesson is this: there will be a reward for all who are faithful. There is promised a crown of glory to all those who persevere in the faith. So yeah, pay your price now. Be a follower of Jesus now, because whatever is good today will pale in comparison, and it will be as junk. It will be disgusting in comparison to what you're going to receive from God in the near future. When you step into that place of eternity, any horrible thing that might have happened on this earth is going to feel like one night in a bad hotel. It's going to be, well, yeah, it wasn't fun, wouldn't do it, but you know what? Look at what I got. Look at what I got. And honestly, it's not just eternity too. I would say the Bible teaches us certainly to remember of eternity, but in my own life, following Jesus has been the smartest thing I could ever do. Making decisions for Jesus. Oh my lands, what a wise way to live. I went through a period of my life where I literally lost everything. And I had nothing, and I thought I was going to be homeless. And at one point, I even had a lady recommending a place where I could go get free food. Boy, that was a shock, you know. She go, yeah, you know, they feed people if you want to go there. And she was right. I was that broke. Fortunately, I had some friends helping me out. But I remember those moments. And in those moments, I really doubted that my life would ever change. My life would ever change. I just thought, well, okay, here I am. This is the way it's going to be now. And no, oh no. Things changed very quickly. Things changed very quickly. And all those decisions I had made to follow Jesus, they all resulted in wonderful things in my life. Now, if you've seen my life, if you know me, if you talk to me, you'll realize that I have a very nice life. I have an absolutely wonderful wife. I'm at a place now where my kids are grown, and it's just so different, and it's all because of the decisions that I made to follow Jesus. When you decide to follow Jesus, it's well worthwhile. There's no regrets. Are there hard things that happen? Absolutely. But there's wonderful things right around the corner too. There's a promise of a crown of glory. And even all the good things that I might be able to point to and why my life is so happy or whatever it might be, pales in comparison to what that first moment in heaven is going to be like. Let me bring it to our last point that I'd like to share with you here. And that's this. Jesus chose to come down the mountain that we might be with him in heaven. Jesus is on the mountain, gets transfigured. Wouldn't that be the place where he now goes right up into heaven? Wouldn't that be the place? Okay, you've lived your life. Okay, this is before the crucifixion. This is before the suffering. This is before so much. But you've done it. You've become, you're born as a man. Now would be an ideal time, Jesus, for you to go right up into heaven, ascend right into heaven. He could have. He could have gone, joined, Moses and Elijah and gone to a big dinner or something, but he chose not to. He says, no, I'm not going up. I'm coming down. I'm coming down. And aren't we glad he did? Because coming down, he was able to collect all of us so that we could be where he was going to go. so that all of us would be included in that heaven. And what motivated Jesus to do that? His deep, deep, deep love for you. That's the only thing that motivated him. He wants to be with you. He wants the relationship with you, that he came back down that mountain and he was there with his disciples. And he says, no, you're going to go to heaven with me, and I'm going to take you guys there all in good time, but we're going to do this together. And Jesus is willing to go through all of the hardships, all of the suffering, the cross, so that we could receive the crown of life. That's what he went. Long time ago, I went to visit this lady in the hospital. She was a lady who had been a Christian for many years, and she had had liver cancer, and in the chemo, it had damaged her bile ducts, and she was miserable. She was nauseous. She had a terrible fever. It was a horrible place. She didn't have long to live, and I went and I visited with her. And, you're always a little nervous what to say, what to do. And the family was outside, and they invited me in. And I went in with my Bible and read some verses to her and just do my best. At that point, it's like a ministry of presence. I don't have anything to say that's going to be helpful, but here I am, just letting you know that, your church loves you, and I'm going to pray for you. You go in kind of like that with nothing. And she's staring off into space. And I go, okay, it must be the drugs, must be something. And so I sat down in a little chair, by where her pillow was, sat down. And she just, again, staring, like mesmerizing something out into the future like that. And I said, well, about time for me to go. So I reached over and I gently touched her hand. And she was a little startled, not crazy startled, but there's somebody here, kind of a startle. And she looked at me, thanked me for being there. And I opened my Bible, and then she says, oh, would you use my Bible? I've got a bookmark where I want you to read. And, yeah, thanks. I'm glad you have a verse that you want to read, because I don't know what I'm going to read. And I opened it, and there it was, Matthew 17. And I opened it up, and I read those verses for her, just like what we read just now. And I went all the way through, and I got down to I had the three verses at the very end, so 6, 7, 8. And when I started reading those, all the dots connected. All the dots connected. It said, when the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. And I knew that she was terrified. Well, who wouldn't be? You're facing eternity. If I was to face eternity, the first thing I'd be doing is saying, oh boy, I hope I repented enough. I hope I said enough things. Oh boy, I don't know. I would be terrified, as anybody should be. And then I read in front of her right there, but Jesus came and touched them. Get up, he said, don't be afraid. And sitting there with her, I felt a peace. Jesus knows I'm not perfect. Jesus knows she's not perfect. Jesus knows we all have a lot of regrets, and he breaks through all of that. And out of his great love to us, he touches us and says, don't be afraid. And I'm thinking, here she is, hours, I don't know, before she passes. And that's what she wants to hear, is Jesus is touching her and saying, don't be afraid. And then, when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. And I thought, this is what she wants to do. She wants to open her eyes and see nobody but Jesus. And you know what? There's a moment that all of us who are in relationship with Jesus are going to be with a lot of people, and then we're not. And we're going to open our eyes, and we're going to see Jesus. We're going to see Jesus. That's the moment all of us are living for. That's why we do what we do, because it's well worth it. It's well worthwhile to follow Jesus. Well worthwhile to follow Jesus. And I get in that moment, and it gets in your head, And it's hard. It's hard to let that picture go of where the disciples are sitting there and they've got their face to the ground because they're terrified of what they've just seen, how Jesus changed. And Jesus breaks all that, comes to them as a friend, and he probably puts his arms around them, at least in my head he does. He embraces them, and he says, okay, let's get up, time to go. Let's go. I'm going with you guys. Can you imagine? Come on, guys, it's okay. Don't be afraid. We're going to go now. And down the mountain they go with this Jesus. Very different from their perspective of how they went up the mountain. In the same way, you and I, as we step out into our lives, same thing. There's this powerful Jesus, the sovereign Jesus, creator and sustainer of the universe, the ground of all being, coming to you, embracing you, saying, it's okay. Get up, let's go. Don't be afraid. I'm going with you. I'm going with you. And I will always be there. In that moment that you go from this universe into eternity, I'm there. I'm going to be the one that you're going to see first. I'm going to be there for you. And that's it, isn't it? That's it. And in this glorious moment where Jesus is transfigured, when the eternity shows up in a moment, in this moment, there's still tomorrow to happen. You would think everything good should happen. No. Jesus is now on his way to suffer. Jesus suffered after the transfiguration. We are going to suffer. After the transfiguration, Jesus is going to die. We are going to die. After the transfiguration, Jesus suffered, died, and was raised to life again. And just as we are going to suffer and die, we also will be raised to life again. And Jesus, he ascended back up into heaven with what is called a glorified body. It is a body that is suitable for an existence, an eternity in heaven. And a body that's made for all time, for eternity. You and I will ascend up into heaven with a body that has been transformed and changed into a body that is now suited for a life of eternity in the same way. That's why we follow Jesus. This is who that Jesus is.